I'd like to have a discussion with you today about getting to know your triggers and your reminders. Now, I know that a large group of you who are betrayed spouses who are dealing with reminders and triggers right now probably just kind of rolled your eyes and were like, oh, I've gotten to know my triggers. And I know that many of you are wading through what feels like an ocean of insurmountable thoughts and reminders and triggers and emotional flooding, and it can literally beat the hell out of you. And today, I want to encourage you to be brave, and I want to ask you to do something that is a little bit courageous and actually lean into the triggers and lean into the reminders, because I think today, by having some courage, we can do some really good recovery work. And if you're an unfaithful spouse, this will help you as well, because I know that you, in your own little way, battle triggers and reminders or certain waves of reminders as well. Now, as you get to know your triggers, one of the things that Rick or lots of good therapists will recommend is that you do a lot of journaling, especially early on. And part of the reason for that is a little bit different than maybe what you have been told. Part of the reason that you really should think about journaling is getting to be discerning about the waves in which the triggers come. Now, for us, I will tell you, we can see them coming a mile away. If we are going through financial difficulty, if things get really, really tight, Samantha deals with some real difficult reminders and triggers and some struggles internally. I also deal with struggles and triggers. If we get emotionally exhausted, or just really exhaustion in general, if there's something that goes on with the kids or something that goes on with our health and our fatigue sets in, get ready, because I can see it coming. There's going to be some type of war that goes on internally in Samantha, or also even myself. Some of you are going to need to understand that throughout the month, hormonally, things change, male and female. There are things that you're going to go through that will affect the way in which you process reminders or triggers or just the enormity of what you're battling through. It's just inevitable that you're going to have to face that. For those of you that don't come from a faith perspective, one of the things that I want to encourage you to do is to start to study the waves in which triggers come. If you're an unfaithful, both for your own triggers or your own struggles, but also for the journey of your betrayed spouse, and you betrayed spouse, as you start to study and get very granular and look back over certain seasons of triggers and flooding, I think at some level you can sometimes see a pattern. Now, this isn't necessarily true if you're really early on, a couple of weeks or a month, when you're still finding out new information. You should still journal. You should still write. You should still kind of get a read on things. But as you're a few more months in and there isn't necessarily new information, you need to be able to study the ways in which you are overcome with triggers. It may start with a song. It may start with a difficult situation with your spouse, and then you start to feel X, and X spills over into Y, and before you know it, you're at Z, and you are off on the treadmill of chaos. And I know from our own experience, I can look back and see how once this happened, then this happened, and it spilled over into this, and then we were just in a spiral, and usually it involved calling Rick or calling a mentor or something along those lines, because if we didn't intervene, we could find ourselves in such a dark place, it was almost like, could we even get out of it? So you have to begin to understand and kind of connect the dots backwards and be able to see, oh, when this happened, then I started to feel this. And when I felt that, then I started to feel this. And then it really got dark because I started to feel this. Now, if you come from a faith perspective, you probably believe in the enemy and understand Satan and understand how the enemy tries to steal, kill, and destroy. And so you can understand and not be deceived in the way that you fight against not flesh and blood, but spirits and principalities. And so you're able, from a faith background, to identify how, oh, man, the enemy got me here. Because once he could get me here, it gave way to this. And once I started to feel this, it started to make me feel that. And once I hit that place, man, it was like there was a point of no return. Perfect example for me. Early on, when I was in sales, I would hit a point where if I lost a deal or two, or things went south, I started to feel very depressed. And that gave way to shame and condemnation, because then I was like, well, if I never cheated, I wouldn't be in this position, and what a failure I am, and what a train wreck I am, and man, I can't do anything right. Am I ever going to do anything right? And now I'm on the treadmill. I'm such a screw up, and God's done with me, and God's down on me, and I can't even save my marriage, and I'm an adulterer. And the spiral, dude, is out of control because I didn't intervene at the very beginning. And so now I'm able to look back, and I'm able to identify now, if things happen, I can go, I'm not going down that road again. If you're a betrayed spouse, it may start with a different reminder or a trigger or something that wants to lead you, faith or not faith, lead you towards a certain mental or emotional feeling. And at that point, you have to be able to intervene and say, no, 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 I'm not going there. I know where this wants to take me. It wants to take me to hopelessness and despair. And then if I get into hopelessness and despair, before you know it, I'm going to give way to anger and maybe depression. And then, you see, it always wants to take you somewhere. Hopelessness is never satisfied with just this momentary little point of, oh, I'm hopeless. It always asks to take you further down the road of despair, giving up, quitting. And the betrayed spouse has some temptations when they hit this difficult point. Revenge affairs, torturing your mate, just doing whatever it is in that little pocket that wants to cause you to lash out, and it will only cause more hurt and pain. Again, this requires a sense of bravery to be able to say, okay, look, I'm going to study the way in which these things come. For those of you that are like, well, I can't study it because I'm always getting new information, you are a bit of an exception, and I understand that. And hopefully you can get to ground zero fast, and then you can begin to identify the waves in which they come, and you can still utilize this process. For those of you that aren't struggling with new information, here's a few things that I have found that helped Samantha and I early on, as well as now, if we hit a point where things happen and there's the temptation to get on the treadmill of chaos, here's a few things that help. The first principle that helps me, as well as Samantha, is staying present. Now, if you study 12 steps, you understand this, but present is being aware of what is happening now, not getting lost in the future, not stressing out over what could be going on or could happen or this or that, and it's also not being lost in the past of, well, this, and being stuck looking behind you, but it's being present to be able to know what is real and what is not. I know for me, if I'm not present, I start stressing about finances and paying for college and car issues, which I can't seem to get out of right now, and all kinds of different things. And so when I'm present, I'm able to be aware of Samantha. I'm able to be aware of her world and what might be stressing her out. I'm also able to be aware of what's going on inside of me, which could lead me to a point of darkness, hopelessness, and discouragement. Another principle is to be prepared. Early on, someone kind of had to bonk me on the head, one of my mentors, and say, look, you're kind of asleep at the wheel, dude. You've got to wake up and be prepared that Samantha's dealing with 80 to 100 reminders every day early on, and so it dissipates as you get further, but there is a point where you have to be prepared as an unfaithful spouse to know, okay, how are they doing? And how can I help? And what can I reinforce? Or if you're really early on as an unfaithful, sometimes it's easy or helpful to come to your spouse and say, hey, you've probably had a long day. How are you doing? How are things? Or when a reminder does happen, and maybe you're in public or you're with the kids and they can't respond, and you come to them later and say, man, that had to be a tough moment. How are you? How can I help? You have to be prepared and understand that they're going to come. Difficult reminders and triggers are going to come after you, the betrayed, and after you, the unfaithful, in your own way. You cannot be asleep at the wheel. Finally, I think if you're present and if you're prepared, it will help you not get baited into doing more damage. I know for us, early on when I wasn't prepared, when I wasn't present, I would see something happen, and then we would have a difficult moment, and then I would respond completely aloof and not prepared and not gracious and not understanding the battle that was going on around our marriage. I would respond in a stupid way. Samantha would then respond in her own way, and before we knew it, we were off to the races. And because I was so aloof and I was not prepared and I was not present, I actually made things worse. And I took the bait, if you will, of doing more damage rather than creating a safe space for Samantha to heal.